So I'm gonna go ahead and start off by sharing my screen. All right. So this evening, I just want to talk a little bit about navigating the college admissions process during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to be talking about your college search. Definitely unique, unlike any other. The virtual college visit, what that looks like, what options there are. We're going to give you a look inside the admissions committee in the year 2020, 2021. And then I've got some good news for you at the end. So first of all, you can see here, this is a tour of our campus in the new normal with social distancing, everyone wearing masks, following our campus protocols. We started these up in July, and we've definitely seen a few schools in the Northeast and throughout the country starting to reopen with tests in this fashion, and so, or with visits in this fashion, excuse me. So, as you know, there are plenty of issues both on the high school side and with college admissions specifically. So some of the things that we've heard the most from students, from school counselors, from parents who are navigating the process. First of all, just how sort of that emergency remote learning in junior year went. It was very rushed in many cases, and there were a lot of concerns about how this could potentially impact students' transcripts and how colleges look at it. Many schools are looking at remote or hybrid options for rising seniors, or if you're a rising junior, obviously this will have an impact on your transcripts as well. We know that this spring and potentially moving forward, some schools may be looking at changes in grading policies. Offering more pass-fail was certainly a trend that we saw in the spring. And also, issues with scheduling and course availability. I know schools already are very constricted in some of the things that they can offer you. And that has only, the complexity has only increased at many schools in terms of how they're trying to approach bringing students back for the fall, either in a hybrid fashion or remote, and how to deliver the type of course offerings that students want and need. And on the college admissions front, obviously things like college fairs, high school visits, campus visits, interviews, these things either aren't available or are not available in the typical fashion, as many of you have found out over the past several months. And then obviously the SAT and ACT have had massive test cancellations, and obviously that is something that's causing folks a lot of anxiety. But other than that, just a normal year, right? So this is something that I think we're all starting to get familiar with. This is a virtual college visit that I did with a collection of schools in Hartford with some other colleges. And these are the types of things that I think we're all going to be used to over the coming year. So what are some of the options that are out there? Sometimes it's difficult to understand what's possible, what schools might be offering. There's no sort of uniform way that schools are approaching this. There are a lot of similarities, but every school is tackling this their own way. So as you're considering schools, I definitely encourage you to visit their websites to find their offerings. So some of the options are virtual tours, which a lot of schools like WPI have had for several years. It gives you a sense of what the physical spaces look like, which is particularly helpful when you can't get onto campus. A lot of these tours have really crisp images inside classrooms, labs. They typically have sort of a virtual tour guide or virtual information that you would get on a typical tour. So definitely worthwhile at schools you're interested in. Some even offer 360 shots of different aspects of campus or a lab. So definitely a good way to sort of get a feel for a place that you might not be able to visit physically. Virtual information sessions for those of you trying to find out more about a specific school. Pretty much every school is offering some form of this, whether it's 10, 20, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, give you a rundown of the facts, a little bit about student life, what the academic offerings are, and those are helpful as you're sort of tightening your list to those schools you think you're interested in, but you want to do a deeper dive on. There are online live chats, virtual academic sessions where it might be by major, or you might have, as you all have had the opportunity, dinner with deans and things like that to learn a bit more and to hear from some faculty members about what the classroom experience is like and the campus community is like from their perspective. Also, we have virtual open houses. I think a lot of schools are doing this on their own. A lot of colleges and universities, a lot of high schools are looking at how to do online college fairs and online high school visits. So these are things I think you'll continue to see more information about, both from your high school and from colleges and universities you may be looking at. I do want to put a plug in for the old-fashioned approach: phone, email. These are things that have always been underutilized and continue to be so to a certain extent. And so if you really want to get an answer to a question that isn't on the website, or you want to talk to someone about concerns you have about your course selection, or just questions about the application process, pick up the phone, shoot us an email. A lot of us are very busy in Zoom meetings, but one of the things that we're excited about is when we get that call or email from a student, it sometimes gives us the opportunity to hop off one of those Zooms and have a conversation with students or with parents who are trying to learn more about WPI. And that's true of our colleagues at other schools as well. So we definitely are looking to engage with you. And I think that one-to-one connection is even more important with your top schools or with schools that you have remaining questions about, because it's important for you to be able to get the questions that you have answered. And obviously, this is a year where many of the normal ways of doing just that are complex or unavailable. And then, as I mentioned before, there are some on-campus options at some schools like WPI, but they continue to be pretty rare and pretty restricted. So inside the admissions committee, and so I tried to get an image here that, well, first of all, I mean, who doesn't love Legos? But that's sort of what the admissions committee looks like in a normal year. These are the folks sitting around a table, talking about applications, typically trying to make a case for students, not against students being admitted. I think that this is probably more what the admissions committee is going to look like in this future year. But the reason I show you those two images is because, first and foremost, I want you all to know, admissions officers are human too. We're going through the same types of things that you and your family and you and your friends are going through during this time. Most of us are still remote. You might see a Great Dane walk in through the picture or hear a baby crying. These things happen, right? I think it's important for you to remember that on the other side of this, there are human beings, and there are human beings that are going to be reviewing your applications with empathy and at virtually every school with a focus of trying to make the best case for you. So we do a holistic review, which means that we look at all of the pieces of a student's application, but we also look at those pieces within the context of the opportunities that student has had. This year more than ever, context is going to be critical. The common application, as well as many other applications, are adding sort of a coronavirus question. So you don't need to necessarily write your essay about the coronavirus. It doesn't mean that you can't, but it gives you that opportunity. So if you have a strong essay, or you want to write an essay about something beyond what's occurred, over the past several months, you have a space to share how the coronavirus may have impacted you, or concerns you have pertaining to school disruption, or a change in grading type, grading, or course availability. We're also going to find out context from your school profile. Many of your schools are trying to update those profiles that they send with a transcript. The profile tells us a bit more about metrics across the school, about courses that are available to students. And we expect a lot of schools will be updating these with information about how policies may have changed in the past year due to COVID, so that people reviewing the transcript could understand why a student may all of a sudden have a whole slate of pass-fail grades, or why someone may have had to stop a certain course or switch courses midstream. And then also the counselor recommendation. Your counselors are often your best advocates, and so we expect that many of them will be sharing pertinent information about impacts from the past year, and how those may be pertinent to a student's application. Now, WPI and many other schools are committing to holding students harmless from academic changes and decisions outside of your control. That's why this context is so important to us. First of all, we want to give you the opportunity to put your best foot forward. So we always read an application looking to say yes, looking to understand you within your context in the most positive light. But also, we know you can't control these things. And the things you can't control are some of the most potentially frustrating or stressful aspects about this. And we want you to know, we know that, we get that, and that's not something that's going to come into our conversations. And then specifically for all of you who are doing Frontiers, hats off to you. Choosing to spend a portion of your summer challenging yourself in a college curriculum, that's definitely something that interests us, and I'm sure it interests other colleges and universities. And I think one of the concerns people might have had jumping into this is, well, what if I go through all this and I end up getting a no credit? And I want to be explicit about this. This will not be viewed as a negative in WPI's admissions process. That no credit is there as a safety net. What we care about is the fact that you actually attempted a college course. That says something about who you are, your interests, your drive, and how you spent some of your summer. And so that is just a net positive from the start. Finally, I think this is really important. Again, this is something else I want to be explicit about. WPI is a test optional school. We've been test optional since 2007. There are now almost 1,400 of the roughly 2,200 four-year universities who are test optional for this upcoming cycle. And over 1,000 of those have been test optional. I think it's important, with all of the cancellations and all the concerns about articles recently coming out questioning whether or not the ACT and SAT test sites could be super spreader events. We do not want you putting yourself, your health, your family's health in jeopardy to take a test. I mean, this is a very, 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 very tiny part of the college admissions process at virtually every school in the country. For WPI, it's one we're pretty open and honest about. We don't need a test score to make a good decision for admissions. I don't think anyone really does, but it's definitely something that is not a really strong draw one way or the other for us. Instead, we care far more about how you spent 4 years of your academic career. That just stacks up much stronger than 4 hours, on a Saturday morning. So if you have not taken a test yet, don't take a test. I can't think of any other college that would actively encourage you to consider going out and trying to take a test right now. I know some of you may be being rescheduled for test sites that are hundreds of miles away. There are all sorts of crazy things going on right now. And there's actually a collection of university admissions deans that are trying to get the word out to say that optional truly does mean optional. And if you haven't taken these tests, don't. If you're a senior, don't even put yourself through that stress. So I just want to be explicit about that. Unless you still have one of those few schools that are still requiring these test scores, I would strongly recommend you don't go to tests, whether you have tested once and you want to increase your test score, or you haven't tested at all. Quite frankly, we don't need that score to make a good admissions decision. And then I think another thing that's come up, people have asked about what if there are large scale deferrals from this year's class that's supposed to start in a few weeks. What if they defer to next year and they reduce the number of spots? this is just not something we're seeing. It's not something we've seen at WPI. We have seen more than 90% of the students who told us they were coming are coming, and it's pretty much on par, excuse me, with past years. We always tend to lose some students who get off a wait list somewhere else, or who decide to take off a year and defer. But in the grand scheme of things, we're not seeing any sort of macro push for deferrals, and I'm not hearing that at other institutions as well. So this really isn't something I think anyone should have worried about in the first place, but definitely based on what we're seeing, it's not something I would tell folks to worry about. And so some of you may recognize this image if you're like me and we're spending some time on YouTube during this pandemic. We have some good news for you. And the good news I want to leave you with before we go to questions is there are three major decisions in the college admissions process: where you're going to apply, who colleges are going to admit, and where you're going to enroll. We spend so much time focusing on the decision that colleges make, who gets admitted. And that's one of those things that is really outside of your control. I think what's important is to really focus on the two things that are in your control. You own two of these decisions, right? You get to decide where to apply. And if you do your homework, you pick a set of good schools that are a good fit for you, you're going to have some great options. Where to enroll? That's the exciting part of this. When you've done all the work and the colleges have made their decisions, where to enroll is the most exciting part of this process. It can be one of the most challenging, and often it's the most challenging because you're going to have some great options. There's no one perfect school for every student. There are probably 100 perfect schools for every student, if not more. So I just hope that everyone will sort of ground themselves on the fact that while we do spend a lot of time talking about the admissions decision, two of those three major decisions are your decisions, and they're ones that you hold all the cards in. So try to keep that in mind as you're going through this process. And with that, I'll pause and excited to hear what questions you have. And I just want to say, I'm so excited to see Sue's face, because I was telling Sue I've had internet disruptions. So I was really hoping that the past 20 minutes I wasn't talking to a dead screen.
No, we're all good. You're good. So what we'll do, Andy, is I will try to field the questions for you so you don't have to keep looking at the chat. And we'll see what we can get answered. So please, folks, definitely put in any questions you have for Andy now, so that we can get as many of those answered as possible. Here's a pretty quick and easy one. For the in-person campus visits, will you be able to see interior buildings, or is it just the exterior of campus?
So currently for WPI, we are only offering the exterior. Students do go into the admissions building, the Bartlett Center, for a very brief period of time for sort of a video information session and to ask questions of our admissions professionals. All of that's done with masks, socially distanced, plexiglass at the front desk. But we're currently only able to offer that to students who are within Massachusetts' excluded group from a new testing protocol that the governor has rolled out. That's one of the things that I think is going to be really difficult, even as schools like WPI are offering these options to visit, is these things change by the day. Sue and I spent 3 hours this morning talking through different policies for visitors and other aspects, and these things out of necessity for the health of our community are going to be constantly changing. So as you're thinking about visiting schools, definitely reach out to us, stay in touch, and if we send you an email, definitely read it before you leave the house, just in case there's important information that might save you some time and frustration.
Excellent. So this is something I'm sure you're interested in talking about, Andy, because it's new this year. Will you still have early decision deadlines for students who want WPI as a first choice?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes. So before the pandemic, WPI had decided, like most of our peers have offered for years, that we would begin offering an early decision option. We'll have 2 early decision rounds. We still have the early action rounds and a regular decision. If you are absolutely sure that WPI is your top school and you've done your homework, right? You need to be understanding what's out there. You want to make the right decision because with early decision, it is binding. So you're making a commitment to the university that you will come. So it's important that you really have done your homework. You're not just doing this because you've heard through the grapevine that it could be a ploy to get in. I mean, that's not really what it's about. It's about getting you a decision earlier, and it's about giving universities a sense of who's definitely coming. So for the right student, it could be a great option. But also, if you're someone who is really concerned about being able to compare financial aid packages, I would really think strongly about considering an early action or regular decision because if affordability is one of the key concerns, you just don't want to make that decision and rule out any other possibilities. So it's really a personal choice. And if you have questions about that process, you can definitely contact our office.
Excellent. We have a couple of questions around testing. Again, somebody just curious if they already did take the SAT, would it help them? And also for the rising juniors, should they still think about taking the testing because it could become a requirement at certain schools again?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll tackle the juniors question first. A lot of the schools that we've had over, I think, 400 schools who in the past 3 months have made an announcement that they're going test optional. There are a few different flavors. So some of those just said, hey, we're going test optional. Some have said we're going test blind. We're not even going to look at your score. Other schools have said we're suspending our testing policy for this year. And so that's a question you really need to consider. Again, it's one of those things you really need to ask these schools, if they're on your list. A final group, which has been the more popular group or most common of the adopters during COVID, have been schools that have committed to 2 to 3 to 5 years running a pilot. So you're probably off the hook at those schools. You don't need to be as concerned. And so, I'll be very transparent. And I think this is a great question to ask every school who's test optional, and even those who aren't. How are you using the tests? I think that is such a critical question because even amongst my peers, people say test optional, but it could potentially mean different things. And so, just to be really upfront, at WPI, standardized test scores don't really tell us a whole lot more than the academic profile of a student, right? If you don't have a strong academic profile, if you haven't challenged yourself in rigorous courses, if you haven't performed, we're not looking for perfection, but we're looking for students who can take that next step to a WPI education and challenge themselves. If you don't have that and you have a perfect score, you're not going to get into WPI. You don't have the academic preparation. If you do have all of that and you didn't test well, don't even bother sending us the test. But if you do, I think that's one of the questions is, is this a good score? Is this a bad score? It's not really about that. At least at WPI, I could explicitly say that test scores are not an academic credential. And so I just want to repeat that. A test score tells us how you scored on a test, on a single test, on a single sitting of the ACT or the SAT. That's what that test score tells us. These test scores also have problematic correlations with family income levels, with sex, and with race and ethnicity. And so for many of these reasons, WPI has decided to be a test optional school. And we've been test optional for about 13 years now, and we have not looked back. We're able to make excellent decisions on who right fit students are for WPI, looking at their academic credentials and just some of their personal traits and characteristics. And so, for us, if you did well on the test, when we say optional, we really mean optional. So that is just like someone sharing with us that they received a gold award, or that they're an Eagle Scout, or that they did a volunteer project. It's an accomplishment. It's an accomplishment that signifies time and energy spent on something that's meaningful to an applicant. And the reason WPI isn't test blind is because, you know, it feels odd to us that in this sort of environment where some schools still require it, and we know that if you're interested in those schools, you should put some time into the test, and you do have to, you know, do some practice sessions. So we want to acknowledge the trade-off there, that some students feel compelled to have to take these tests. So we don't want to say, no, don't send us that. Because we wouldn't say that about, you know, a robotics project that you wanted to tell us about, or the website that you've created to show us your musical performances. You know, we're not about saying no. We're about giving you the opportunity to put your best foot forward and show us what you want to be represented. But I will just say again, test scores are not an academic credential for us. So we hold it with the same weight that the other sort of optional things people will send to us in the process. We use it for context.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. Um, so we have a question about how on average, how long would you spend on each application? That's a pretty individual question, I think, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great question. And I actually read some great advice on this last week. That's something that makes a whole lot of sense, but I don't think people necessarily think about right away. And that is, you know, you're looking at the application process, especially if you're applying to the common application schools, or if you're applying to schools around the coalition application. You know, a lot of the requirements are the same. And so, you know, you're looking at it as essay. You're looking at it as, you know, additional information I need to add. And the advice that I read was some really great advice. And that was, as you go to submit for each school, approach the application as if you're applying to that school. Even if you do all the things, you know, at once, that's human nature, right? We've sort of made the Common App this assembly line process to make it easier for you. But before you hit that submit button, realize that what you're sharing with each school is going to be how they're viewing you, right? We don't have the benefit of seeing you for 17, 18 years of your life. We have the paper that you send us, and the paper that your school sends us, or the digital files now. And so that information is important. But if you think about it as sort of was what I was just referencing, you know, how do you want to present yourself to each school? I'm not saying you need to brand yourself, but think about how your essay, and if there's an additional school essay, you know, think about the connections between those two. You know, if you're asked, you know, what is it that you love about WPI? And then you're asked, what is it that you love about RPI? I'm going to pick on our rival. Those essays should not look the same. We are very different institutions. We draw a lot of the same students in terms of the academic programs that we have, in terms of students creating a well-rounded list. But there are some fundamental differences in terms of the type of campus atmosphere and the type of student that's drawn to one school versus the other. And that's not to say one is better or worse. But that's just to say, think about the specific school before you hit submit. And I really think that, you know, for some schools, it's going to be quick because they may not ask for anything beyond the common application. For other schools, you know, your top school, you may really want to dig in and give it some more information. I think the flip side of this question is, how much time are schools spending on applications? And so I'm sure someone has either already asked that question or will. So I'll just jump right into answering that. It depends, but I would say it really ranges from 8 to 30 minutes, and the 8 is far more common than the 30. And so there are a couple different ways that schools review applications. I'll explain one of the ways, which WPI does not do, but that is more prevalent in recent years. That's called a committee-based review. So committee review puts 2 admissions professionals, typically a more senior admissions professional with a more junior professional, And one person looks at the academic credentials, another person looks at the sort of personal qualities and the subjective material. They're in a room or on a Zoom, and they're reading their portion, and they're sharing tidbits as they're reading, um, to one another. And so it's a collaborative process, but it's also a, talking and thinking at the same time. A lot of schools have rolled this out because they simply are not able to um, review applications in the ways they historically had because of the time commitments needed. And so committee-based review is a faster review, but you do have two people looking at it at the same time. And typically they make a decision right there. A small portion of these schools will go on to a committee, but the vast majority are decided in that room. And so that tends to be 8 to 10 minutes. And so at WPI, we take sort of a more traditional approach where we have a first reader who is assigned to a geographic territory, so that person gets to know states, school districts. They're sort of the expert for the school that a student goes to. And that's important for us because of context, right? The more context we can have as we review applications, the better our decisions are going to be because we're more informed about the opportunities available to individual students. And so at WPI, the typical process is someone will get a first review, someone will get a second review, which is from a senior member of the admissions team. And at that point, a decision, if both readers are in agreement, a decision is made. For about a third of applicants, there's either disagreement between the two reviewers, or there's a sense that we need a broader group of people to have a conversation. So then it goes to our admissions committee. About a third of all of our applicants go through this committee process. And again, just like the application review, it's trying to make the best case for a student standing in the committee. And so you go through that process and the decision is ultimately made. And so that's really where the 30 minutes comes in, because you might get 8 minutes from a first reader, another 8 minutes, and you probably still don't get 30 unless you're a really tough case. You probably get another 6 or 7 minutes in front of committee after that second review. So, maybe 20, 22 minutes, but keep that in mind. I think that's really helpful, especially as you're thinking about things you're going to put a lot of effort into, like the essay. We're not going to be able to get, again, 17, 18 years of information in 500, 600 words. So pick one or two things that you think will resonate, that you think represent you, and that you think are important for schools to know. And so very often it's the student who writes about one thing about their life or two aspects of their personality that are critical. Very often those are the best essays because they've given themselves the space to provide examples, to explain why they think that's important for them, for who they are, but why it's important for colleges to know this as well. So I'm not saying you have to write about one thing or two things, but once you get beyond there, I think you really start running out of room and time to really flesh out what it is that you want to tell people who have a very short amount of time to review your application.
That's great. That actually leads us right into some good questions about the interview, another way to get to showcase yourself. So some questions around how important is the interview in the admissions process? Do you recommend interviewing? How is it weighted during the review process? So if you could share just a little bit about your thoughts on the interview.
Yep. And so, like basically every other answer I'm going to give you, it's going to depend on the school that you're applying to. There are two types of interviews. One is informative, where you're really trying to share information about the school. A student might be wanting to share information about themselves. The second is evaluative, where students are going to get ranked and scored, and that's going to go into a calculation that a school may have. And so, for WPI, we lean much more informative. It's an opportunity to engage with someone on the admissions team or to engage with a student. I think folks who get the student interviews, that's, I feel like you get the golden ticket because, man, it's a double whammy, right? You get to find out information about the school, but you also get to talk to a student who, is not paid by the school to be there. Right? They're there because they love WPI. They want to engage with students who are just like them, 2, 3, 4 years ago, um, and share some of their insights. And so, what a great way to get some real questions answered. That if you're sitting with myself or Sue or Andreas, we're not going to be able to answer. What's the best thing to do on a Thursday afternoon in between classes. Asking students those sort of lifestyle questions is a great extra opportunity in the interview process. I would say, regardless of what school, I don't think interviews hold a ton of evaluative weight. I think if you want to do an interview, do an interview. If you are someone who is incredibly stressed out and it's going to cause you anxiety, we don't want you to be anxious. We don't want to cause you stress. This process is stressful enough. So I share that. And then just from personal experience, many, many moons ago, but also just a trend that we've seen in higher ed is most schools are phasing out alumni interviews. I think that if a school offers an alumni interview, I tend to recommend not to expect too much from that because well, it's great to meet someone who's had an experience at WPI. Heck, my dad's an alum of WPI, class of '74. It's changed a bit since then. So actually, Sue's entire background wasn't there. There was a parking lot. So I think just something to keep in mind. If you have an alumni interview opportunity at school, just going eyes wide open. It probably doesn't have much evaluative weight, and also you may get some dated information. But you also might have a great conversation with someone who loves the school.
Yep, excellent. We have a bunch of questions around academics and academic rigor, GPA. So one of the questions is, if I haven't taken a lot of APs or college courses, how will that affect my admission? And then another question about recalculating GPA, whether we recalculate GPA. And then finally, one more question I'll lump in there is, students are concerned that they may want to take certain classes this fall, but those might not be offered by their school districts, and what we will be able to see or what we would know about that. So hope that's not
Yep.
too many all at once. But
No. So first of all, we do not recalculate GPAs. We trust schools to share with us what's important. And again, that school profile they share provides us with a lot of context. I'm sure I'll forget one of these, Sue, so you can
that's all right.
remind
Yep.
me which one I forget. I think the final piece of that, really getting at something that I spoke to, in the opening part of the session, and that is, let us know if you're not unable to get a course that you normally would be able to get, or even just like any other year. I had to choose between physics and Calc BC, right? We hear this all the time. Your school district can't make everything work for every student. We understand that. Again, our job as admissions professionals is to try to understand what was the context, what are the opportunities available to you, and what are the decisions you made based on that. And really, we're not looking for someone to have taken every AP available to them, right? That we're not looking for that. That's kind of ridiculous. What we are looking for is did this person take a reasonable amount of rigor? Did someone take a bunch of AP courses and their grades started to go down? That's not really a positive for us, because you're going to take another step up from that AP course to college level work, and that's important. It's an important indicator for us that a student might not be ready in those courses that they may have dipped in their grades. Now, if you're knocking it out of the park in college prep courses, and your school has honors and AP and you haven't taken those courses, that's going to be something that the committee is going to have questions about. Again, because it's far less a judgment question, and it's much more trying to get at the two questions that we're really trying to solve in admissions committee. One, can this student do the work? Are we concerned about their ability to do the work at WPI? And two, really the higher bar is, will this student thrive at WPI? And not just academically, but is this a student who's really going to be an engaged member of our community? Is this a student who is thrilled about projects or likes the idea of um, a collaborative style of education. And so, these are some of the things that we're looking for. And so if, we're hoping the school counselors and the school profile will give some of this information. You don't get to see your school counselor recommendation. You probably won't see your school profile. Some schools will share that with you. Don't count on someone else telling us. Tell us. There's a special portion in the Common application as well as the Coalition app, and I would assume any other, individual school app or state system application you might be using. That there's going to be an opportunity for you to talk about how the pandemic has impacted your ability to take certain courses or has impacted the types of grades that you've gotten. And I forgot one. So what was the first?
No, I think you got them all.
Okay.
So I think you touched upon them all. So that's great. Um, we have a question kind of around, I think you touched upon, the atmosphere might be different at WPI than it is at RPI or other institutions. So somebody wants you to share a little bit about what you think the atmosphere at WPI is.
All right. Well, I'm glad it wasn't what I think the atmosphere at other schools is like. That's not kosher.
uh,
Yeah. So I could say, I joined the WPI community 5 years ago. And I think, there's no typical WPI student, and that's probably true of every school. But when I think about who is it that just gets super excited about WPI, who are the people who, I have that interview or I meet on at a college fair or an open house, and I just know in that moment this person is going to be a WPI student. Like I know I haven't seen their transcript, I haven't seen their application. I just know, and I think it's people who really get excited about a collaborative education. It's students who love working in groups and working in groups in a way that's different than most high schools most high school students do groups. When I was in high school, it was okay. You do this half, you do this half, and you're a good writer, so you pull it all together at the end. That is not the type of collaborative education we have here. And so, one of the things that I think is really critical about a place like WPI is that, yes, you're going to learn from your faculty members. You're going to learn a ton from your group mates and from your classmates. And so that is a really distinctive aspect, especially in a STEM environment. And so I think that, we see fit factors for students who are thrilled about that. Students who love the idea of diving deep, right? We have a pretty unique 7-week quarter system. That's intimidating to some students. Some students say, oh, I want a whole semester to sort of get up to speed, catch up. You're gonna be taking midterms week 3. Not sure I'm okay with that. So, and other students are like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like I'm going to take 3 courses at a time and just dive into them. I'm going to meet with that class every single day. The pace is going to keep moving. And so, when we hear students talk a lot about, my high school's a little slow, like I didn't do as well in that class because we kept stopping to sort of rehash old concepts. And so for a certain type of student, our curricular setup is a win. But I think projects, right? I think projects is probably something WPI does as well, if not better than any other university. And I say that without hyperbole, right? We have been doing projects in a really distinctive and meaningful way for half a century. We are doing things at WPI. We've been doing them for the past 50 years in ways that right now are the emerging best practices. And so, and that's not the best fit for everyone, right? There's going to be that student who says, you know what, I want to go to this school because I have followed this individual researcher and I want to work in her lab, and I might get a course with her, and that is exactly what I want to do. And you know what? Maybe there is that researcher at WPI, but we're less likely to draw students who have that type of a laser focus. For us, it's much more about students who love complex, the unknown, sort of solving problems, right? Solving difficult problems that don't have easy solutions. And so, when I think about who is a WPI student, that's really what comes to mind. And I think that's exactly the type of faculty that we have as well. It's the same personality type that want to come here to dig into messy problems and questions alongside students, not at the front of the classroom lecturing to students.
So after you've said that, Andy, we have a question about robotics engineering, and I will say that we often see students who are so excited to know that the man who wrote the code for FIRST Robotics, Brad Miller, is a faculty member at WPI. So, but I will say that this question is about, have we found that offering a degree in robotics engineering gives us any competitive advantage? Or has it confused grad schools or industry partners? Are we seeing more schools starting to offer specifically a robotics engineering degree?
Yeah, so WPI had the first bachelor in robotics. We also have masters and doctorate in robotics. I don't think there is any aspect of our robotics program that is problematic to industry. WPI is seen as a leader in this field. I mean, I think one of the things you find, whether someone is in robotics or is supporting robotics through mechanical or computer science, a lot of these students have engaged with FIRST, with VEX, with communities where WPI is very well represented, and we see a lot of interest from students who are engaged in those things. So I think just the caliber of faculty and the caliber of students that come through our programs, there's a reason that if you go on our career development site, you can get the prior year's graduates. You can see not just what they're earning based on major, but the companies that they work for. There are very few schools that Elon Musk's companies go to recruit. WPI is among them, and so I think, seeing robotic students getting, internships, co-op jobs at SpaceX, watching those rockets take off and realizing, yeah, like some of the students that have gone on to careers in companies like that have started with, a robotics degree. And so I think, there's always that question about, is it too early to specialize? And the way WPI teaches it, I don't think so. In fact, I think it's pretty distinctively WPI, right? You're in every single course, you're going to build a robot. When we had to go to remote courses in an emergency, 2 weeks with 2 weeks notice prior to D term this spring, students built robots in their courses. I mean, like, that is a commitment to doing this type of education in a very WPI way, which is hands-on, which is collaborative, which is combining the theory and the practice with a focus on making impact on our community and the world.
Excellent, thank you. Can you just talk a little bit about how we feel about volunteer work or community service during the admissions process?
Yeah, great question. It's one of those things that's optional, right? I mean, I think one of the things that's great about the college admissions process is we're not telling you what we're looking for outside of the classroom. And I think that should be empowering. I realize it also, brings a lot of questions with it for students going through the process. And so what I'll share is that there is no one thing that is more valuable than something else. So if you volunteered, that's awesome. If you've worked a job, that's awesome. If you have helped to take care of younger siblings or have helped to take care of family members who may be ailing or in need of assistance, that's great. I think some of those things often you don't necessarily think of. So that's the one thing I would share is that I have often heard students say, I don't really do anything. And then you ask a couple more questions, you find out your day outside of school is jam-packed, but it might be more focused on your family, or it might be more focused on your community. Maybe you're involved in a religious or spiritual organization. That's not necessarily the thing that comes to mind, but all of these things tell us a little bit more about who you are, about what's important. And your time is limited, right? So you spend your time on the things that you value as a person. We want a well-rounded community. We want people who have all different types of experiences and interests. And so I encourage you to share those, but also know that we're never looking at candidate A, candidate B. Hey, they got the same grades. They both have same test score, not that we care. And, but this one volunteered and this one got a paycheck. We're just not, that's not ever a scenario that comes up.
Excellent. Thank you. So here's somebody who's looking for a little inside info on the magic of the whole process of building a class. So, if decisions are made one applicant at a time, how do you ensure that you have the right diversity, the right number of accepted students, those types of things? So that's a
Yep.
great insider's question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. So, and I neglected to talk about this. So I appreciate you asking this question. So, a lot of places like WPI call this crafting a class. Harvard, I believe, infamously calls it lopping, which sounds pretty awful. But this is one of the reasons I think it's really important for everyone to really take a step back and realize that that decision that colleges make, first of all, is not a value decision. This is not something that you should think is a measurement of your worth, that school XYZ waitlisted you or didn't admit you or did admit you. I think that unfortunately in our society, I think that's college admissions has played an outsized sort of proxy role as to self-worth or value. And I would encourage you not to focus on that, because there are aspects of this process that are completely unfair, and that you have absolutely no control over. And so one of those things is that when you have an admissions process where you're trying to advocate for every single student, almost every single year you come up with a pool of too many students that you want to offer to. And so then you have to go back and think about, okay, how do we make the difficult decision of pulling back some of these students who we wanted to admit and potentially deferring them to a later round or offering them a wait list. And so it's done in a myriad of different ways at different institutions. But for the most part, it tends to be done as people are evaluating. If they're seeing a student who may be a little bit weak, but there's a really compelling context as to why they might be weaker within the pool. They might be given a note that says, let's look at this person again if we have some space. Another person, there may have been a disciplinary issue, or there may have been a really questionable couple of grades in the junior year, but we wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. That person might be flagged with a difficult sort of, hey, we may look at this person to defer to another round if we have too many admits. And so there's a whole sort of attempt to project how many admits we have within our pool. It's probably about 50-50 art and science. And I would say that, it often comes down to institutional priorities. And those can shift from year to year, from, one part of the admissions cycle to another. And, for some schools, it's really important that there is a diversity of majors, that, they may even admit by major because they want to make sure that, some of their smaller programs have enough students so that they're viable. WPI, that tends not to be the case. But, at WPI, we are absolutely committed to considering students who are historically underrepresented in STEM fields. That is something that is core to our mission as a university. There definitely aren't quotas. There's not, an automatic flag for someone. But we do think about, each time we're building our class, one of the difficult things as a private university is, how are we making sure that we're not closing the doors on groups of students who historically have had those doors closed to them? What is WPI doing to ensure that we're providing access for all students, and that we're not keeping students out based on factors that may be outside of their control? But again, it could come down to it at another school. Hey, we've got these, athletes, and we really care about student athletes, and that might, make a decision. And so I think institutional priorities is the best way to describe it, because even at an individual institution, it may shift what some of those decisions are on the margins.
Excellent. So we have two more questions, both around early action and early decision. So I think that'll be our final. Those will be our final two questions. And one is kind of related to deciding when to apply early decision, ED1 or ED2, um, and because they might want to try to improve their GPA throughout the fall semester. And then the other question is kind of touching upon again, is there any downside in applying either early action or early decision?
Yeah, great question. So, when's the right time to apply? When you're ready. And that's going to be different for every single student. Um, so if you're waiting on pulling up a grade, don't think, hey, it's more advantageous if I go early. Like, pull up that grade. But again, don't make it about what you think we're going to want to see. Make it about what feels right for you. So I would say you submit it when you're ready. And I hope that's not a cop out, because it's a very serious answer. I've seen students submit it when they've had a conversation with our admissions team on the road, and we said, you're right. You probably should wait and try to get that first quarter or first semester math grade up. And they're one of the first students to apply that year. So I think it's less about what you think we want to see. It's more about when you feel like you're ready, when you feel like, yeah, I put the best foot forward for this university, and maybe it's still a stretch university, or maybe I feel really good about it. You may apply to different schools at different paces, but I wouldn't worry about trying to project what you think we want, because I'll be perfectly honest, like there's not a right answer for me that, oh, I want to see everyone come in ED1, or, I actually want to wait. I want to see people come in ED2. There's not really a preference there. And so the other piece was, is there a negative to applying ED or EA? And so echoing my last response, if you're not ready to apply, that's a downside. And wait to regular decision if you have to. If you apply ED and you really need to compare or want to compare financial aid awards, you've just eliminated your opportunity to do so. And so the award that you get from WPI, and I'm not saying we're going to purposely try to short shrift anyone in the process. That's definitely not it. But affordability is a very personal issue that is very different for each student. So if you're confident there, fine. But there's still the potential downside. I'm really selling ED, right? There's still the potential downside. You have 10 months from when you apply ED to when you're going to attend school. You may change your mind about some pretty critical things, including the major you want, including the region of school that you want to go to, the size of school. So I think ED is right for a very small number of students. We're adding it. We've been asked for years from students, why doesn't WPI have this? Other schools that I'm applying to have it, but I want to do it here. It's a great opportunity to get a decision and know where you're going. Like, hey, that's the upside, right? Like, I know where I'm going. I'm done. This is great. And so, but the downside there is that you really are done. So you've made that decision. You need to pull your applications from other schools. So really only do it if you feel confident in that decision. And EA, really, there's not really a downside. As long as you feel like you're ready, it's not binding. You just get a decision faster than if you were to apply at a later cycle. And so there's a dedicated timeline in which we promise to deliver a decision for you. So that takes some of the waiting and guessing out of it.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we thank you, Andy. I don't know if you have any final thoughts or final words of wisdom for this group, but
I don't know about wisdom, but I do have some thoughts. So I will say, and I think Sue mentioned to me earlier this week that she might have sent the letter around that I wrote, basically to juniors this spring, to our rising seniors, and I think it applies, to rising juniors as well. Focus on what matters right now. I know so much of this college search process is already overwhelming in quote unquote normal year. Being the first class to go through it during a pandemic is I guess less than optimal. But also realize that this is an important opportunity for reflection, right? This is, a set of three decisions that you're going to make in a lifetime of hundreds of thousands of decisions. And they're important, but there are very few wrong decisions you can make if you commit yourself to putting in the time and research to finding out what's right for you. And that's what this is about. It's not what you think we want to see. It's about you and what you want to do and the type of place and environment you want to do it in. But I would really say testing courses that aren't available to you, pass fail. Oh, I really wanted to go in person and it's going to be online and I'm really stressed about that. Tell us, tell us in that coronavirus portion of the Common App, but then let it go. Like you need to focus on what matters: your health, your family, your friends, and trying to do the best you can in your academics, but also acknowledging this is a global pandemic. It's all right to feel a little bit stressed. It's all right to feel like, oh, this wasn't my best work. Like it's okay. But the better you treat yourself and the more you allow yourself to let go of the things that you don't have control over, I think the smoother this process will be for you, the better the outcomes will be, and the more sane you will feel throughout the process.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. So, really great to have you here tonight, Andy. Thanks so much. Thanks to everybody for coming. We did add a couple of links in the chat. You can reach Andy through admissions@wpi.edu, or you can email us at pop@wpi.edu. And I think Andreas shared a link to Andy's letter again. And I'll put a plug in for him that the Frontiers participants fill out that survey for us. We would appreciate that. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate it, and good luck with the last week and a half of Frontiers. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.